This is going to be an unusual review. I always try to make my reviews unusual, but the reason it's going to be unusual is you're going to see quite a few shots not flying, because I want to show off the image as much as possible. You see right now, it's not flying, it's on the ground. This is the Greek island of Skiathos, a place that has become my second home. Initially I came here just as a tourist, but then my relationship with it changed. I've made 4 documentaries about the plight of the stray cats on the island to raise money for the Skiathos Cat Welfare Association, as well as my deeply personal film Sharmalipi, which I feel is the best thing that I've ever made. I've also filmed numerous reviews here, including the one for the DJI Mavic 2 Pro. In this review, you'll get a taste of why this island is so special to me, as well as some of the things I do each day when I visit, filmed as much as possible with the Mini 3 Pro. And a word of warning, there will be a fair few cats in this video, which is a good thing. The whole reason the DJI Mini line of drones exist is their weight of less than 250 grams. In some countries, you cannot fly a drone, even for fun without a license, if it's not below that weight. In the UK, a huge benefit of a drone in this weight class is you can fly it recreationally and commercially in the A1 subcategory, which means you just need to register your drone, take a very simple online test and follow the basic rules. This will be still the case when the official CAA classifications finally come into force at some point. For heavier drones, what you need to fly them is different right now to what they will be when the CAA classification rules start. I'm not going to go into them in this video, but I will leave a link with more info in the video description. The original Mavic Mini was pretty basic. Mediocre 2.7K image, just a bottom obstacle detection sensor, and pretty poor image transmission. The Mini 2 was much better. 4K video up to 30p, and the vastly superior OcuSync 2 transmission system. Still just a bottom sensor, but it's the go-to beginner drone for many because it's the cheapest one that DJI make. So I've been told this is not a replacement for the Mini 2, this is a separate product. The 2 will still be for sale and be the beginner drone. This is for people who want the extra features that were missing because they couldn't put them in a sub 250 gram drone, which they've been able to do now, but don't mind paying the extra for it. Is it worth the extra? Yeah, absolutely. This is miles better than the Mini 2. There is no Mini 3, just a Pro. So if you want any of the increased specs in the same weight class, well, this is your only DJI option. To put all these features that they have in a 249 gram drone, there had to be a lot of compromises. But I was surprised as to just how few there seem to be. In fact, I would probably place this drone as being superior to the Air 2 in many ways. Not quite as good as the Air 2S, which is still an absolutely fantastic drone. The funny thing about the Mini 2 being a beginner drone was the lack of sensors meant that I didn't always recommend it to people as their first drone. I would say get one with sensors, you know, Air 2, Air 2S, because if you're flying for the first time, then they can help you. But mind you, none of those have side sensors. But we do have sensors now on the Mini 3, forward and rear and below. Yes, still no side sensors, but makes a lot more sense. It does also mean we have the latest version of APAS, and we do have things like active track, and you know, it can work well to a point for following. Just be very careful because those lack of side sensors could cause something to happen which you don't want to happen. You know what I mean. My favourite way of using the APAS system is Spotlight. It's the same way you select a subject got me here, and it's manual control. It just tries to keep you roughly, or the subject roughly, in the centre of the frame. Generally, the subject, not you. Not always filming yourself. Very rarely do I film myself, just for these reviews. But it works pretty well. The sensors are set to bypass. It will still fly into a tree if you go sideways, but for the most part, it's all right. As you can see, when it loses you, hopefully it will pick you up again. You never know. There we go. Not so bad, really. So yeah, Spotlight is definitely my favourite way of using the APAS system. Of course, we also have Active Track, and I used it a number of times to follow my car, as well as some walking shots. It's just I'm always nervous about giving full control to a drone that has no side sensors. But it surprised me at times at how well it did. I would pretty much always use warp stabilized to iron out some of the more mechanical movements that you get with Active Track for sure. I don't tend to use these sort of modes much for actual shots. I use the obstacle sensors really just for not crashing, but I mostly turn them off because the drone is very close to me, and I like flying close to subjects, and I like flying backwards through anything that's there. It's really impressive that DJI have put in this system into the Mini 3 Pro. It makes it so much safer, and it is more intelligent. But it isn't my favourite improvement, not by a long way. Image is everything when it comes to a camera, and this is a camera. It's a flying camera. It's got to have a nice image, and this is so much better than the two. When I'm in Skiathos, I have a routine. Every day I feed a number of stray cats on the west part of the island. It's something I've been doing since I made those initial documentaries about the plight of the cats back in 2018. Each time I come, I hope I will see as many of the same cats as before. But this is never the case. There's always ones which go missing. And this time, it was my beloved Dave who wasn't there.
You're silly, Dave.
He hasn't been seen since late January, the day before snow hit the island. I miss him so much, and I wish I knew what happened to him.
Beautiful, Dave. And a silly little tongue. Oh, I missed you, little man.
But of course I still go every day to feed his friends. Every time I do this, the number of cats I befriend and add to the feeding run grows. But I love seeing them, and it is the highlight of my trips here. And the footage that you're seeing is so different to what you would normally see with a drone, but it really helps me to assess the camera. The Mini 3 has a bigger sensor than the 2. It's almost at 1 inch, not far off it. And it does make a big difference. The new sensor is 1/1.3 inch compared to the 1/2.3 inch of the Mini 2. Now, to know how different they are in size from that is incredibly hard because it's based on such an antiquated system. And I've made a whole video about this, which is linked above. What's much easier is telling you about the surface area. The Mini 3 Pro sensor is 2.43 times bigger than the Mini 2 one, and it's about 2.2 times bigger than the Air 2. Being 12 megapixels, but being a bigger sensor means we now have a cleaner image, better low light performance, and better dynamic range. It's still an ICL sensor though, so don't expect miracles, but there are of course other benefits that you get with a larger sensor. Now you can get some shallow depth of field. It's the closest focus I've seen of any of the drones that I've used from DJI. How useful that is for flying, it's lots of close-up shots in this video, but most of them are not with it powered up. To get really close focus in the macro mode, it's just way too close. Having a 1.7 lens is very unusual for DJI because I think all their drones that I can remember have f2.8 apertures. But of course these are all relative to the sensors. You can convert the aperture to a full frame equivalent, but that is really just for the depth of field purposes. It's not going to calculate your exposure. To get the identical shallow depth of field that we have here on the Mini 3 Pro at 30 centimeters, you would need to stop down that lens on that full frame camera to f6. Where the shallow depth of field does play a part is when you have stuff in the foreground that you want to be focused on infinity. You will see it if your focus is off. That's why I recommend using manual focus and peaking when you can to make sure you are locked onto infinity. We now have D-Cine Light picture profile, which is really nice to have. It's a nice middle ground between D-Log and normal. Now, we don't have D-Log, even though it's got the Pro name, and we don't have 10-bit recording. But you need 10-bit ready for the D-Log. You can cope with 8-bit with the D-Cine Light, but of course, would I like 10-bit in this? Yes, absolutely. But I also like to have D-Cine Light in the Mavic 3, and strangely, it's not in there. But it is in the Mini 3 at least. I expect part of the reason we don't have 10-bit or D-Log is down to the processor just wouldn't be able to cope. One of the compromises of such a small drone is there's no space for cooling, and it relies entirely on the props to cool it. For the shots where I've used it when it's not flying, it was overheating so quickly. The only way I could continue was to keep changing batteries every 30 seconds or so, because they did heat up pretty quickly.
Severus! Hello. Hi.
This is my favourite beach. This is a laney beach. And it's been my favourite since I first met Severus here. And of course, my Harriet, who I adopted. Love it here. Great company. So yeah, a laney beach. Best spot on Skiathos. This is where I spend every afternoon until sunset. This beach is so special to me. And I am incredibly close to the cats here, especially the wonderful Severus here. She's featured in so many of my videos and was a big part of my film Sharmalepi. This is my happy place. What was really nice and refreshing was I had the full firmware for this review, so I want to try out as much as possible. The Mini 3 Pro is stated as having HDR video recording. I would strongly argue against that statement, as the way it records video is not in any officially recognised form of HDR, or even compared to their other drones that do have it. I only finally got the full information about what's happening after I got back from Skiathos during a lot of back and forth with DJI. I'm afraid this is going to get a little bit technical now, so bear with me. In the menu, you will see HQ next to 4K up to 30p. This is what they are calling their HDR modes. What we actually have is dual conversion gain. This takes two exposure readings for the highlights and shadows from the sensor and fuses them together to create an image that they are saying has a higher dynamic range, which in theory it should. DJI told me in their tests they managed to get 1.6 more stops. I will take their word for that. When I was in Skiathos, I wasn't sure what the HQ meant. In the limited tests that I did, like this one with Sevi, using the exact same exposure settings, I was getting about a 1/3 stop brighter image, but I don't feel I was getting any more dynamic range. The low and high conversion gain levels that it reads at are not at any set point, they are adaptive depending on the shot. Unlike when you shoot in the 4K 48p and above, where it uses a traditional dual ISO system, which is stated as 100 and 800, but is actually 100 and 500. They say 800 because you can only increase the ISO in one-stop increment values in the hour, so you cannot actually select the high base of 500. So that's why it's stated as 800. They add 1.6 times of analog gain to get from 500 to 800. The only way you can actually record in the high base of 500 is by using auto exposure. It's just you'll never know when you are actually there. When I got home, I did a number of controlled tests, including my covered lens test, where I pushed the exposure up by 5 stops in post to compare the different noise levels. And this confused me immensely. And a big part of this is because of two very dirty words: noise reduction. The noise reduction of the camera made analysing noise levels and dynamic range very difficult. But more importantly, it can give you some pretty dreadful looking video if you don't know what to avoid. I did some shots in my new Casio, which is named after Eleni Beach. Keeping the camera settings the same, I got that 1/3 stop brighter exposure in the DCG mode. But other than that, I couldn't see much difference. When I did the shot again, but at the same exposure level, there was again little difference, but looking at the waveform, there did show a slight difference. And with some pixel peeping, I could see a tiny bit more into the shadows, which were cleaner in the DCG mode, but the noise reduction of the camera makes that totally unreliable to use as any form of comparison. So I did some tests to look at noise reduction of the two modes with my cats, and they gave me some startling results. With the 4K 50p, the switch from 400 ISO to the sort of high base of 800 looked pretty much identical. As I increased the ISO in the DCG mode, the increase in noise reduction the higher I went was kind of shocking. You could see it increase at 800 ISO, but at 1600 it was awful. In 50p, the increase from 800 to 1600 ISO again showed an increase in noise reduction, but comparing it to the 25p, the difference was huge. And at 3200 ISO, both had too much noise reduction, but at 25p one, oh my god, yeah. I'm not even going to show you the 6400 one. And this super heavy noise reduction will have a big impact on any low light filming that you do. Because I didn't know any of this at the time, when I filmed all of these shots in Skiathos, I was in 4K 25p at ISO 1600. It wasn't until I looked at the footage in detail when I got home that I see just how mushy the video was and how odd the motion blur was. It was such a shame as the shots were really cool, but at least they weren't for any paid job, just for this review. If I knew then what I know now, I would have shot not at 4K 25p ISO 1600, but at 4K 50p ISO 1600, as that does have way less noise reduction and is actually very usable. Unfortunately, you cannot turn off the DCG. It's always on at every ISO in 4K up to 30p. Don't worry about shooting 50p in low light. You don't need to follow the 180 degree shutter rule and lose stopper light with your shutter speed at 100th of a second if you are planning to just drop the footage onto a 25p timeline. What does help with low light filming is that f1.7 lens that DJI have given the Mini 3 Pro instead of their usual f2.8 That's 1.5 stops more light, which with that noise reduction is absolutely invaluable. ISO 1600 in 4K 48p and above is really what I would recommend not exceeding. ISO 3200 in the same frame rate is usable if needed, but only if it isn't hideously underexposed and would need pushing up in post. If that was the case, then I would say it's time to pack up, head home, and have a nice cold Mythos. I did ask DJI why it was so much stronger in the 4K up to 30p, and they said it's because they consider those frame rates to be more for the shoot and post users who don't want to do any work on the image, whereas the 4K 48p and higher was for more professional users. I said if they believe this, then why not tie it into the normal picture profile, which I don't use because the dynamic range is too limited, and keep the D-Cine-like as a less processed mode, a more pro mode for this Mini 3 Pro. After all, D-Cine-like has to be graded. I really don't think DJI should be calling this HDR video recording. How it captures light with the sensor may be made for HDR, but because it isn't recording in 10-bit HLG, PQ or any other true HDR format, then it's not HDR video recording. Especially since DJI's other drones that say they have HDR video recording actually do record in 10-bit HLG. Most of us already know what HDR looks like. With our modern smartphones and with the HDR screens, you can see the benefit immediately, although those can often be a little bit too much. But it is HDR though. DJI did say to me that they are going to be improving the image. When this actually happens, I will let you know in the description of the video. Just over there is Castro. It's a long walk, and I can't do it because I actually prolapsed a disc on the way here. So it's been a quite painful trip. But I've got a nice high viewpoint, so I'm going to be able to get out there. I'm always impressed at just how well DJI's drones can work in the wind. Well, I mean, the original Mini had issues getting back at times if the wind was too strong, but since then, no issues. Definitely will struggle in some really strong wind. This is not going to have the power of the big ones, so just be sensible. I brought the Mavic 3 with me as well because I wanted to get some shots at this location with the 162mm lens. I never thought I would have found this focal length on the drone useful, but I've fallen in love with it. Despite the fact that the image from it is not very good, it's just the perspectives and shots that you can get with it are so unique and so refreshing after so many wide-angle drone shots. Running it through Topaz Labs Video Enhance AI most definitely makes the image look better. I do hope that DJI can improve this camera with some firmware to give it some different frame rates, some manual control, D-Log. They're not going to be able to improve the lens though with firmware. And if they can, I would be very impressed. In September 2019, I made my film Shamalipi. The filming of this affected me deeply, and is very much part of the reason why I spend so much time with the stray cats when I come here.
The spine cord is injured, if not cut.
Every time I come back to Skiathos, I head off to a remote spot to see Rocky, a beautiful cat who, along with Severus, was the heart and soul of the film. Each year I add another of these red bungees that I always wear on my wrists to Rocky's grave. I only knew him a short time. Love you, Rocky. But losing him broke my heart. And for as long as I'm alive, I will go and visit his grave each year to remember him. By default, the photos are 12 megapixels, but you can also get 48 megapixel ones by using the quad Bayer part to split each pixel into 4 to get an image 4 times the size. It's certainly nice to have high resolution stills, but the dynamic range does take a slight hit, and they aren't quite as clean. But in the right situations and with good lights, they really can look excellent. The main downside to them is it takes longer to take each photo, and unsurprisingly, the file sizes are 4 times bigger. Each raw photo takes up nearly 100 megabytes. The Mini 3 Pro has all the panorama modes that I've seen in the other DJI drones, but you can't use the 48 megapixels when using these, but you can of course just shoot them manually, which is what I like to do anyway. When you are shooting high resolution stills, the quality of the glass is quite important, and I don't think this is the highest quality lens you've ever seen, so don't expect like crystal clear, pin sharp, chromatic aberration free images, because, well, you're not going to get them. But what do you expect? It's a 249 gram drone. They're pretty good considering. The video image itself is still over sharpened, but because of the increased sensor size and larger pixels, it is much more acceptable, but it's still a bit too much for me. It really is time for DJI to bring back the ability to adjust our image controls for sharpness, contrast, saturation. This was possible in the Go 4 app, but has not been available even for the Mavic 3 for any drone since the launch of the Fly app. And if they do bring it back, please add a noise reduction option in there as well. If they're worried about overcomplicating things for people, just simply have an option for the app to operate in a basic mode and one for a pro mode. This is a flying camera after all, and most cameras give you the option to do these things, apart from native smartphone apps, that is. But even GoPro and Insta360 both give you the option to change your level of sharpness. So there really is no excuse. It's really lovely that the 4K, 48p, 50p, 60p video have no line skipping and use the full sensor. I was not expecting this, but I am very grateful it's there. There is also 120 frames per second slow motion available. It's HD. It's pretty ugly as it's line skipped and only works in the normal picture profile. When I run it through Topaz Labs Video Enhanced AI, it definitely helps it a lot. But really, just stick to 4K 60p as your maximum slow motion for the best image quality. In 4K up to 30p, there is a zoom function, which goes up to 2 times. It's digital, not optical. Comparing it to a 200% crop of the original shot, yes, it didn't look as noisy. That's because they're using more noise reduction, but they're not doing any upscaling. Running it through Topaz Labs gave me better results as expected. It's not something I would tend to use. I would much rather do things in post, but in a pinch it could be useful, and if you are going to use it, I really wouldn't go past 1.5 times, so you can maintain some detail. Something that we haven't seen since the original Mavic Pro is the ability for the camera to shoot in portrait mode, vertical video. The camera can rotate 90 degrees. I've been told that this is big with the kids and on something called TikTok, which I have no idea what it is. Why anybody would want to shoot vertical video is beyond me, but it's actually very useful in photo mode for shooting manual panoramas. Joking aside, if you are using this for social media, just know that there is no ability to record sound with your proxies like you used to with the Go 4 app, so it's going to be mute whatever you record. And if you are using the new DJI RC controller, it can be a little bit tricky getting video clips and stills off of it onto your phone. I didn't try hyperlapses out, and I didn't use the master shots either. In fact, I only just did one of the quick shots, the good old droney. There's so many trees on this island. The only big enough open space would have been out at sea. The quick shots and master shots only work in the normal colour profile and only in 30p. But there is at least manual control, but I would love to have 24, 25p, and especially the Cine-like. I don't normally give prices in my reviews because it dates them, and we're not all on the same currency. But there's a number of different packages. I need to give a currency, so I'm going to give my one. I think you can find out how much it is where you live. It's not that hard. If you just get the Craft on its own, it comes with a battery and props, I'm assuming, £639. And if you get it with the standard RC, £709. Obviously more money than the Mini 2. Substantially more money than the Mini 2. For £859, which is £220 more than just the Craft, you can get it with the DJI RC, which is their new controller with a screen. And I've not even mentioned the flywheel combo, £159. I think that's the 2 batteries, the charging hub, some spare props, and the bag. Battery life is pretty decent. They quote around 30 odd minutes. I was getting around 22-24 minutes on average. With the Flymore kits, you get 2 additional batteries and a 3-way charger. You absolutely need these. The batteries are just 18.1 watt hours, and they're charged via USB-C, either in the Craft or in the 3-way charger. Now I used my 100 watt hour power bank to keep charging them up again when they got flat when I was out filming, and I was able to get 5 additional charges out of it. DJI have made larger batteries for this, and they are 28.4 watt hours, but they don't let you buy them in Europe because it pushes the drone over 250 grams. It's funny, DJI won't even let people in Europe buy the wide angle adapter for that same reason. The main differences between these is, well, obviously this has a screen. This has more buttons and controls. We have double dials, we have buttons on the back, which is good. We don't have the 2 on the front that this has, but for the most part, we have more buttons on them. Strangely, they've changed the control stick design, so we now have a female stick that screws in onto the male bit here, which is a bit annoying. Especially if I've only got one set. And they're really sensitive. Standard controller isn't as sensitive, doesn't have as many controls, doesn't have a screen. But I made a whole video about how I modified this to give me the much missing tripod mode. I need to try and figure out if I can do the same thing with this. I've not been able to with the RC Pro yet. So yes, unfortunately, the Mini 3 Pro, like all their drones from the past 2 years, doesn't have a proper slow speed mode anymore. When DJI replaced the much loved tripod mode with Cine mode in the Air 2, the ability to get beautiful, slow, smooth and controlled cinematic shots was made so much harder. bizarrely, if you ask DJI customer service or on social media why they removed tripod mode, they still are saying that cine mode is just a renamed tripod mode. I don't know why they won't acknowledge that it is not. Tripod mode has a top speed of 1 meter a second. Cine mode is 5 meters a second. In fact, the Mini 3 Pro Cine mode goes up to 6 meters a second. I know a lot of people who are hanging on to the Mavic 2 Pro for the very reason that it still has tripod mode. If you're going to go for it, I think you should definitely get the DJI RC. It has made a difference for my filming here in Skiathos. I have been able to see the screen the whole time. It's 700 nits, the RC Pro is 1000, and it doesn't dim like your phone dims when it gets warm, and my phone goes dim when it gets warm, whether it's my iPhone or my Android phones, they all go dim when they warm up, and this stays bright, and that is really important, you know, to see the screen. Really important to see the screen. Extra money though, it all adds up, doesn't it? But this is a worthwhile investment. My only real negative to this is that control is just so sensitive. It's more sensitive than a standard one. It's very reminiscent of the RC Pro sensitivity. And you can't dial it down to what you want it to be because there's no tripod mode, there's no adjustable cine mode. The speed is what it is. The cine speed mode isn't that much different from the normal mode. You know, you can adjust the curves in the app a little bit, doesn't help that much though. I see no reason for why DJI have not listened to people complaining about removing tripod mode, because it was a fantastic thing. Surely having a slower, more controllable drone means less accidents, it's safer. I can see no reason whatsoever for them to not bring it back, none at all. And I urge DJI to please listen. It's a hugely important feature for everybody. Please bring it back. It doesn't have to be the same thing as tripod mode, but just let's have an adjustable speed. Cine mode, we can go as slow as tripod mode and as fast as your current cine mode. Pretty please, with sugar on top. I even started a petition around the time of my Mavic 3 review because I just couldn't believe it wasn't in there. I've now just given them the petition and I'm really hoping for a positive reply. I will keep you updated. Because of the new design at the front, you can now point the gimbal up to 60 degrees, which is great. It's much better than the usual mount, which is around 20 degrees, and you still don't see the props. I like the new style of the Mini 3, especially the way it sits in the air in a slightly more aggressive way than the two. It reminds me a bit of small man syndrome. What I'm no fan of though is the colour. Grey. Why always grey, DJI? It wasn't always this way. I guess if I can make new controller sticks to give the drones a faux tripod mode, I'm pretty sure I can give the Mini 3 Pro a new colour. Can't be hard, surely. I should probably check Skillshare, the sponsor of this video, for any tips on painting. If somehow you don't already know, Skillshare is an online creative learning platform with many thousands of different classes. And I've watched loads on all sorts of varied topics, some connected to what I do, but most are something new. Searching for painting brought up many, dozens of different classes, and I watched them all, just to be sure. Starting with Lorianne Gonzalez's excellent course on acrylic painting.
This class is perfect for those who have absolutely zero experience with painting, but also great for those who have experience but want to brush up on their skills.
While strangely none was specifically about painting a drone, they certainly gave me enough confidence to just go for it. What? That's not right. What's happened to it? Well, at least I've learnt a lot about painting. You can get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare by using this code or by clicking the link in the description. To see if you can expand your creativity, just don't try and paint your drone. The Mini 3 Pro is an incredibly impressive piece of technology. That they managed to put so much into it and still keep it below 250 grams is an engineering marvel. It's so feature-packed and performs so well. Yes, I've got some negatives, there always are, but the positives definitely outweigh them. It's just so easy to take with you, and it has nowhere near the compromises I expected it to have compared to the bigger drones. This is not my best drone by a long shot, but it's probably my favourite one now. It was so nice to test it out in a place that's so special to me. Making this review was so much more of a pleasure than it normally is. I just love this island so much. I love these little guys so much. I can't wait to come back and see them all. And if you found this review helpful, I don't want anything from you, but if you could donate something to the Skiathos Cat Welfare Association, it would help keep these wonderful cats fed and help keep the neutering program going. It doesn't matter how small the amount is, because every little helps. Thank you. DJI are pretty good at this drone thing, aren't they? But I really should try another brand at some point. Ah.